Hello and welcome to Tech Deals. Ryzen 3rd Gen versus Intel 9th Gen. Which should you buy? We have 4 CPUs to compare today in 30 different benchmarks. Ryzen 5 3600X, Ryzen 7 3700X, Ryzen 9 3900X, the 12-core 24-thread beast, and the venerable i9-9900K from Intel with 8-core 16 threads. This is a lot of testing here. You'll notice that there's more CPUs on the desk than I just mentioned. I will cover the others in follow-up videos and sort of take a narrower look at whether they're worth considering. This CPU is the Ryzen 7 3800X. We're not talking about it today. I might mention it briefly. We're looking at the ones on either side. This is a Ryzen 5 3600. I recently filmed a build guide with this. Spoiler alert, for those of you with about a $1,000 budget, that's the CPU you should be looking at. There are benefits to going higher, but this is an incredible value for the money. And these are the new Ryzen APU 3rd Gen chips, kind of sort of the really Zen Plus, they're not Zen 2. The 3200G and the 3400G, those will get a dedicated video. Now, I have covered the i9-9900K a ton on this channel. In fact, some of you are probably sick of hearing about it at this point. Yeah, you're still going to keep hearing about it. In fact, very soon, Intel will have a refreshed version of this chip, the i9-9900KS, which comes stock, out of the box, 5 gigahertz, all 8 cores, all the time, whereas this requires overclocking to make that happen, although not very much, because 4.7 is the boost speed if you have sufficient cooling on all the cores without overclocking, so it's really only a 300 megahertz overclock. Now, today we're looking at 250, 330, 500, and variably about $480 CPUs. These should generally be combined with graphics cards in the $500 to $700 price range, maybe with the exception of the Ryzen 5, if you're looking for an awesome gaming machine. An RTX 2080 Ti is not a waste of money, especially Ryzen 7 and up. And in fact, as you're going to see in the charts, these new Zen 2 chips, especially the Ryzen 7 3700X, do an amazing value of keeping up with that i9. For our test bench configuration today, the Intel is installed on the awesome Z390 Taichi board from ASRock. This thing is a killer beast for overclocking. It has all the features, performance, power delivery, and everything else you'd need for the top-end Intel chip. On the Ryzen side, all 3 Ryzens were installed on the super premium MSI Ace X570 Meg motherboard. This is like a super premium motherboard and very nice for Ryzen 9 builds. It is unnecessary and overkill for Ryzen 5 and Ryzen 7. There are less expensive boards that you can use for those, but in order to keep everything consistent, that's what I use for my standard Ryzen test bench. For those of you curious, Ryzen 7 3700X, something like this gigabyte motherboard, the Aorus Pro Wi-Fi, in the $250-ish price range is about right. And for the Ryzen 5 CPUs, something like this MSI B450 Tomahawk is at about the right price point. Different motherboards are different features, not different performance. You're not going to see different performance from different boards. It's PCI Express 3, PCI Express 4, how many M.2 slots, how much Wi-Fi, does it have 2 gigabit Ethernet ports, that sort of thing, how much RGB does it have? Those are the main primary differences when you go up. Power delivery does improve. That Meg Ace I just showed you does have superior power delivery. If you're going for extreme super maximum overclocking, which I don't think is worth the trouble or the money, then you want a super premium board. But for most people, scale it back a bit, save yourself some money, and put it in your graphics card. For RAM, all of the test benches have 32 gigabytes of Corsair Vengeance Pro RGB DDR4 3200 CL16. We have Samsung 970 EVOs and Pros. The Intel actually has a Pro drive, it won't make any difference, as a boot drive. And then all of the machines had the Gigabyte RTX 2080 Ti Extreme factory overclocked card. You guys saw this on my build with the i9. It's a wonderful card, and so I'm now using it for my test bench for all of my comparisons. Now, to be absolutely sure, this is ridiculous overkill if you're buying a Ryzen 5 3600 anything. However, if you're buying a Ryzen 9 3900X or an i9-9900K and you're building a super premium system, this is absolutely not crazy. It's expensive, but it is very fast. The primary reason we're using it today across all the CPUs is this is a CPU comparison, not a graphics card comparison. We want to uplift the graphics card performance sufficiently so we're actually testing differences in CPUs rather than just bottlenecking everything with a graphics card. I understand not everybody's going to buy one of these. It is worth noting that even though the testing today is at 1080p high detail, graphics were still a limitation in some cases. Some games and some applications are in fact still graphics card bound even at 1080p. Others are not. You'll see some charts today where there is a wide disparity of performance between these chips, and then you'll see some where they're all really close and tightly packed together. What bottlenecks your system depends upon what you're doing. Sometimes it's your CPU, sometimes it's your graphics card, sometimes it's just a poorly written program. Assassin's Creed Odyssey. As always, everything talked about in today's video will be linked in the video description below to Amazon and Newegg. Those are affiliate links. They support the channel. I do get sampled from AMD and Intel at times. However, everything from here over I purchased. This is a retail chip, and all of these are retail purchases. AMD did send me the 3600 Non-X chip, and they sent me the 2 APUs, and so when those come up in future videos, then certainly I'll be appreciative to them. But I don't get sent everything, so all the testing you're about to see today was done on retail CPUs. One final note I almost forgot to mention, Noctua NHD15 Super Premium Tower Cooler was used to run the i9-9900K at 5 GHz. The stock coolers were used for all of the Ryzen chips, and I actually did use the ones they come with. The Ryzen 5 3600X used the Wraith Spire that it comes with, and the Ryzen 7 and the Ryzen 9 used the Wraith Prism RGB cooler that they came with. So the performance and the temperatures you're going to see were done on those stock coolers. Last but certainly not least, before we get to the benchmarks, and there are a lot of charts here. Number one, I cannot put all of the full run benchmarks in this video. There were 39 minutes of total recorded footage with the benchmarks trimmed. Those are on a second video. I'll show you a snippet of it up here. That's going to be on the Rogue Tech Gaming channel. I'll link to that in the description below. If you want to see the full run, actual recorded benchmarks on all 4 of these CPUs, go check out that video. It's not a lot of talking. It does have the charts, but it's mostly just there so you can see the entire runs. I'm going to show you a couple of snippets here and then get to the charts to keep this from being an hour-long video. The other point is, I am reusing the launch benchmarks of the Ryzen 5 3600X. It has not yet been long enough to mandate retesting this. I will be retesting it in the future. There's some BIOS updates coming for Zen 2 Boost, which this was done before. And when I do the 3600 versus 3600X, I will retest this. In addition, MSI Afterburner did not support temperature and power consumption numbers when I tested the Ryzen 5. When I tested the Ryzen 9, MSI Afterburner, which you'll see in the real-time numbers, had gotten updated. So the Ryzen 9 benchmarks have those numbers, but the Ryzen 5 do not because of the version difference, because there's a couple of weeks difference between testing. I don't mind testing several weeks apart. That's usually not a big deal. I don't reuse benchmarks, for those of you curious, like a year later. Tests done in 2018 will get redone for 2019. Windows gets updated, drivers get updated. There's too many changes. So when the next round of BIOS updates come for the Zen 2 Boosts and a few other changes to graphic display drivers and whatnot, I'll then go back and retest these and get the power and temperature numbers from them. But for now, we're making do with what we have. And with all of that preamble out of the way, let's get to some charts. The first benchmark is Far Cry New Dawn, MSI Afterburner real-time numbers in the upper left-hand corner of each. In just a second, I'm going to slow this down to 5% because I want to take a look at a couple of numbers in more detail. But in short, these were tested between the beginning of July 2019 to the middle of August. It's about 6 weeks total, same version of Windows, same version of the drivers, which is why the numbers look a little differently, and why the temperature and power consumption aren't on the top 2 tests, because MSI Afterburner needed an update to support it. So here we're going to slow it down to 5% speed. The first number I want you to look at is the top line. The RTX 2080 Ti, wonderful graphics card, it is being bottlenecked by all 4 CPUs. Yes, even the i9. In this particular case, we're using 87% of the graphics card on the i9 and about 72 to 76% on the other CPUs. The purpose here is to do a CPU test, not a graphics test. That's why this is 1080p high detail. Come down to line 3 on all of the CPUs. The Zen 2 chips are all running at about 4.2 gigahertz. This is just what they run at out of the box when you're actually playing games and using the chips. We are expecting a BIOS update soon to help improve this, but at the moment, this is what they're doing. And you'll notice the i9-9900K is, as always, running at 5 gigahertz. 4.7 is stuck on that out of the box, but it's turn on multi-core enhancement, boom, you're 5 gigahertz without any effort whatsoever. Look at the usage of each processor. The Ryzen 5 3600X is at 34%. The 3700X is at 23%. The 3900X is at 13%. And the 9900K is, whoa, lo and behold, at 26%. The reason for this is very, very simple. 100% usage on any of these tests would require all cores and all threads to be utilized. This is a very common misperception, thinking, well, if the game's using 4 cores and they're 100% used, then the CPU usage should be 100%. Why? If you've got an 8-core 16-thread chip, the only way to reach 100% CPU usage is to have all 8 cores and all 16 threads fully utilized. Go run Blender or 7-Zip if you want to do that. That's really the only way that's ever going to happen. Games won't do it. More threads don't make the game faster, but they smooth out frame delivery, they improve frame pacing. In most cases, they generally improve the overall user experience, background tasks, windows, multitasking, etc. On the Ryzen 7 3700X and the i9-9900K, 8 cores and 8 threads would be 50% usage. 4 cores and 4 threads would be 25% usage. Each individual core is 6.25%. Notice that the Ryzen 5 3600X is more and the Ryzen 9 3900X is less, because the 3900X has 12 cores, 24 threads, and the 3600X has 6 cores, 12 threads. This game, at least in this built-in benchmark, doesn't remotely care about whether you have 6, 8, or 12 cores. It runs the same just fine. Many games are going to be like that. Currently, right now, the Ryzen 5 3600 or 3600X is absolutely all you need to play basically all the games on the market today. There might be 1 or 2 rare exceptions, but basically you can play everything today on that. You don't need 8 or 12 cores unless you're live streaming, content creation, etc. Thus the difference. You will also notice, those of you who are keen-eyed, that the frame rate of the 3 Ryzen chips is not overly different. There will be a few minor differences throughout the benchmarks, but we're going to go through them really quickly because you're going to discover very quickly that a Zen 2 core running at 4.2 gigahertz, if you're not core limited, doesn't run any differently whether you have a Ryzen 5, 7, or 9. That really isn't a big surprise if you know how cores and processors work, but I understand not everybody does, and it's important to show it. The i9-9900K is the fastest gaming CPU in the world. That also shouldn't surprise most of you who pay any attention to benchmarks or tech channels or anybody who's done these kind of benchmarks over the past couple of weeks that Zen 2 has been out. However, Zen 2 has dramatically closed the gap. And while the i9 is faster here, in this particular moment, we're getting 128 frames per second versus about 100 frames on Zen 2. And notice, that's like 28% faster in this moment in time. That's pretty sweet. On the other hand, do you have a 60 to 100 hertz monitor? Who cares? Run the game at 100 frames per second. Although in fairness, this is the built-in benchmark. In live gameplay, in busy areas, these numbers will drop. If you want to play these games at maximum frame rate, then you need maximum processing power. It is important to remember that these are just representative and not absolute numbers. Now that I've given that really long explanation, don't worry, I won't repeat it for each of the upcoming benchmarks. I've returned the game footage to full speed, and you can see it change in real time. Again, nobody here should be surprised the i9 wins, but of course it does so for a higher price point, which is the point of these videos. Is it worth the money, or are you better off with the less expensive processor? As this benchmark ends, we'll jump to the benchmark chart. 112, 114, and 115 frames per second average on Ryzen 5, Ryzen 7, and Ryzen 9 respectively. The i9-9900K, 143 frames per second. Woohoo, winner! No doubt whatsoever, everybody should buy an i9, right? Well, I understand. If you don't have a 144 Hz monitor, if you've got a 60 to a 100 Hz monitor, or if you have a slower graphics card, then these numbers won't matter. If we put a RTX 2060 or an RX 5700 in here, all of these numbers would compress down and basically be the same frame rate. The reason you're seeing such a disparity is that RTX 2080 Ti. It is worth noting that if you buy a CPU and later upgrade the graphics card, today's RTX 2080 Ti is tomorrow's RTX 4060 for $400. Today's $1,000 graphics card becomes tomorrow's, or well, really 2 or 3 years from now, tomorrow's $400 card. So if you want to know how much future proofing you have in your CPU, if you're keeping your CPU for 5 years, this gives you an idea of how much future reserve performance your CPU has. This doesn't matter to the majority of buyers, I suspect, but hopefully it's useful information for you. Now, I'm not going to slow down this benchmark, or we'd be here all afternoon and this would be an hour-and-a-half long video. This is Metro Exodus. This also is a relatively recent game, and I'm just trying to show you some footage from very recent games. I'll show you the charts in a minute for a bunch of other games, but these are sort of more recent games that have come out that show performance. I also recognize that these are built-in benchmarks of single-player games. Battlefield 5, Call of Duty Black Ops 4 will come in a separate video. It takes a long time to properly benchmark those in multiplayer. Battlefield 5 on the same maps in 64-player Conquest is not a simple matter to benchmark. It's because you got to do it several times. You've got to make sure you control the area in the map you're in and that you do the runs as similar as possible, because garbage in, garbage out. If you don't do the benchmark runs right, then the numbers are all over the place. I've done it in the past, and I'll be honest, not all of my benchmark runs in Battlefield 5 and even games like Overwatch have been as good as they could have been, because I haven't controlled enough for where on the map I was and even map selection. When I do those follow-up videos here, I will do it. Just to test like 4 games in live multiplayer online gameplay will take an entire day to do properly. That is actually a pretty major undertaking. So I'll do a follow-up video with far less preamble, and I'll cover those properly. For now, we're taking a look at single-player AAA titles, as you can see right here. And here are the benchmark results: 112, 111, 109, and 124. Intel wins! It's the fastest gaming CPU in the world. That really shouldn't be a question for any of you. Anybody here questioning that point, let me throw that right out the window right now. Intel wins. Intel wins like all of this. Intel is the fastest gaming CPU in the world. It's also $500 with no cooler for an 8-core chip that really needs a $200-ish motherboard to run right, so it's expensive. But it is fast and it works very well and it's a great chip. On the other hand, that $240 Ryzen 5 3600X is real close for a whole lot less money. Shadow of the Tomb Raider. I am only going to show you the first scene here because it's really long otherwise. Go watch the full run length over on the Tech Deals Gaming channel. Rogue Tech Gaming if you're interested. I am going to slow this down because Shadow of the Tomb Raider uses a lot more CPU power than Far Cry New Dawn does. And I think it's worth noting that there is actually a difference here between the different Ryzen CPUs. Not a huge one, but there is a difference because of that. And there will be a larger difference when you're actually playing the game and in future games to come. How much you care depends upon your personal preference. The Ryzen 5 3600X is using 66% of the CPU right now. The 3700X is using 53%, and the 3900X is using 42%. Notice that the two 8-core chips, the i9 and the Ryzen 7 3700X, are both using 50%. This game is using 8 cores, or rather 8 threads. That is why the 3600X is using 66%. 8 cores, or rather 8 threads in its case, because it really only has 6 cores, is roughly 66% of 12 threads, which is what it has. And 42% is roughly the same thing, 8 threads of the 24 that the Ryzen 9 3900X has. You will also notice there's a small frame rate difference between the Ryzen chips here in slow motion. Now, I am absolutely aware of the fact that 144 to 147 to 148 is a completely trivial difference and no big deal. However, these are at low detail on a super powerful graphics card in a built-in benchmark. Extrapolate this out to the next game next year with a nice graphics card being played in live gameplay. It is true that a 6-core 12-thread chip is, quote, all you need today. How long it lasts depends upon the games that you want to play. And this is a really good comparison. Far Cry New Dawn doesn't really care. It uses 4 threads. This one, it uses 8. And when I do the Battlefield 5 and Call of Duty Black Ops 4 testing, you'll see it use 12 plus. 16's a bit of a stretch there, but you are going to see a larger difference in terms of core and thread usage. What's interesting is you will not see a huge performance difference even in those games today. What it will be is better frame pacing and a smoother overall delivery and the ability to multitask and the ability to live stream and the ability to have a second monitor watching videos or doing other stuff, and it makes it for a better overall experience. The simple advice to give you is buy all the CPU you can afford. It will push off whatever future upgrades you need as far into the future as possible. But if you're on a budget, well, hey, the Ryzen 5 is still an amazing chip. The i9 is the fastest king here, but of course it has 8 cores and 16 threads, and it may very well run into issues for people who want to live stream games like this, because you notice that it's using 60% of the CPU, all 8 cores, and we're into the hyperthreading now on the i9. If you want to live stream it, yeah, it'll be fine, but you may not have 5 years of live streaming on that chip, considering this benchmark. Going back to full speed, and again, I'm not going to show you the valley and the end scene here because we're trying to keep the length down, and I'm going to keep my comments short on the benchmark chart itself because I've pretty much said everything I want to say when it comes to these charts. 134, 139, 144, and 165. Average frame rates, those are amazing across the board. You can read this chart 2 different ways. You can say, man, Intel crushes it. Look how much faster Intel is. Intel's awesome. What are you crazy AMD fans talking about? And the AMD fans can turn around and say, what you talking about, Willis? The $240 processor from AMD is within spitting distance of the $500 processor from Intel. What a deal. So pick your argument because you all win. The fact that we have this competition, all of us, the consumers, whatever one you buy, we're all the winner here. I love it. This is so exciting to be in this time because a couple of years ago, there was no competition. It was boring. And this is exciting. Yes, Intel wins for more money. Take your pick. How much are you spending? What's your system budget? I absolutely love this competition. One more benchmark, and then I'm just going to show you charts. If you want to see the rest of the footage from all of these, go check out the link in the description below to go to the Rogue Tech Gaming channel, which is where the 39-minute video with all of the full-run benchmarks and all the charts and everything else are there if you are interested in seeing that. I included this for 2 reasons. Number one, the performance is just absolutely incredible. Considering the beauty of this game, considering how recent it came out, it is just absolutely stunning. And this game is absolutely using that graphics card almost 100%, but not quite. There is a small performance difference between them. Again, we're in the built-in benchmark. I have a question for you, my viewers. I am absolutely going to do Battlefield 5. I am absolutely going to do Call of Duty Black Ops 4 because I know those 2 games want cores and threads. It's a good demonstration of CPU power. Should I do the Division 2? Should I do the Division 2 multiplayer? Is there a different game you want to see? Do any of you really need to see Overwatch? I thought about doing Overwatch. Overwatch is tremendously popular. Overwatch doesn't need any of these processors. A Ryzen 5 1600 is enough for Overwatch. I mean, spoiler alert, I'll tell you that now. I mean, I guess unless you need 300 frames per second, but how many of you are that competitive of Overwatch players? What 2 other games do you want to see besides those 2? If I do a 4-game follow-up of online multiplayer live gameplay, that's really what I want your comments for, because I could do the Division 2, but maybe you care, maybe you don't. Let me know. 184, 187, 199, 209. Yeah, that didn't really tell us much other than, wow, holy smokes, really, really good performance, really beautiful. It's a little bit different in live gameplay. I haven't beaten the Division 2. It's not quite that good in the actual game. The benchmark's kind of forgiving in that department. I do built-in benchmarks because they are so much faster to run, and I run these a minimum of 3 times. Many of these I run 5 times repeatedly in order to average out the results and try to make sure I've got consistency and repeatability. And it's really nice for comparing systems, but well, it isn't the actual game, so it doesn't always match. How about we quickly go through all the other benchmark charts? Assassin's Creed Odyssey, boy, talk about a compressed result. 110, 110, 111, and 121. So about 10 frames per second faster on the i9. This is a terribly optimized game, so what can you say? Look at those minimums. They're terrible. Mankind Divided, again, the i9 wins, but compressed results on the Ryzen 5, 7, and 9. It just absolutely doesn't care about how many cores. This game's a bit older. I'm probably going to stop testing this here pretty soon, but I'm including it because it's still within my benchmark suite. Dawn of War 3, again, doesn't really care about the cores and threads so much, just loves that clock speed and performance of Intel. I suspect this is one of those games where live gameplay would actually make a bigger difference because the built-in benchmark is kind of short, but, well, that's what the comment section is for. F1 2018, it's a driving game, it's a racing game. You can see here we get better performance out of the faster chips. Interestingly enough, there is a performance difference between the Ryzen 5, 7, and 9. Not a huge one, I mean, these are pretty minor, but there is. Far Cry 5, I'm just including the chart here. I did run the benchmarks. I showed you Far Cry New Dawn. This is the older one. And yeah, fairly large win there for Intel, but still great performance across the board. Final Fantasy 15. This is the standalone benchmark, I should say. And I realize that it doesn't 100% reflect the performance of the game. Yes, that's been pointed out to me, but at least it lets you compare the systems. Or at least not, because this is actually graphics card limited for the most part. Not many of these tests are graphics card limited. For Honor is another one. Where are all the games that are this optimized? Look at this. It's just straight across the board. No, I don't know why it's 143 on the Intel chip. It is for some reason. That was kind of strange. But I ran that several times and it kept coming up that way, so it just didn't like me that day. Forza Horizon 4. The Ryzen 9 made a difference here, and that was run multiple times. 190 and 190, the cores and threads, and for whatever reason it matched the i9. That's interesting. Ghost Recon Wildlands, pretty flat across the board. The Intel wins, but not by all that much. I mean, that's, what, 5? Well, actually about 7% difference right there. It's faster, but it's a pretty trivial difference, all things considered. Grand Theft Auto 5 is an interesting one because this is only the section of the car driving at the very end because otherwise it stutters. Yes, it's faster on Intel, but traditionally GTA 5 runs much better on Intel systems, so the fact that they're all that close is impressive. Rainbow Six Siege, this might be a contender for being one of the 4 multiplayer games. The built-in benchmark, I don't like it. I'm probably going to stop running this because the built-in benchmark does not reflect the game. So let me know if you want Siege included as one of the live games, even though I suck at Siege, but I'll try. Strange Brigade. Why are more games not developed like this? For Honor, Strange Brigade, Steep, which is about to come up here. If game development companies would do less Assassin's Creed Odyssey and more Steep and Strange Brigade and For Honor, then we wouldn't have to spend $3,000 to have amazing performance on our desktops. Come on, companies, do better. Stop sucking so much. The original Division here runs very nicely. I'm also going to stop doing this as well. I had some of these results, so it was easy enough to finish it out. But this is going to be one of the last times that I test the Division because we have the Division 2, and it's kind of redundant at this point. World of Tanks, that might actually be a contender for doing live gameplay, but why? Not on these chips. I'll do World of Tanks on like the APUs and lower-end chips, but even though this is on-core and the standalone benchmark, World of Tanks runs so well on these machines, it's just ridiculous. That was a lot of testing and a lot of work to put together the video and all those numbers. The i9-9900K remains the fastest gaming CPU in the world. However, at what price? The fact of the matter is, the $240 now Ryzen 5 3600X keeps up with it amazingly well. Because it has 6 cores, it will not last as long into the future as an 8-core i9 will, But then again, you have the $330 Ryzen 7 3700X, which frankly, except for a slight reduction in frame rate in some games, is pretty much the equal to the i9 without requiring an expensive cooler. It's worth noting, we had a $90 tower cooler on the i9 versus stock cooler on the Ryzen 7. And the Ryzen 7 is a freshly launched product. It's about to get a BIOS update to increase the boost speeds. There's been some minor teething issues with the launch boards and the launch CPUs, but they are working on BIOS updates to fix that. So we may actually see a performance boost coming soon. Not a huge one, but maybe 3 to 5% more performance, which is never a bad thing. The reality is, for any of you on something called a budget who are looking for value for the money, I cannot yell and scream loudly enough that for 3 years, the Ryzen 5 3600 is the deal. $200. That's basically the same performance as the i7 8700 from the previous generation with an included cooler and installs on inexpensive boards. For the value side of the table, that's really where the deal is. The X chip comes with a better cooler and it boosts a little bit faster, but the reality is there's not a huge difference between these chips, and the 3600 is where it's at. I am somewhat inclined to say that if you're going to come up to the Ryzen 7, you might consider the Ryzen 9. If you want a 5-year CPU, if you want something, now this is a forward-looking statement, and I'm using my estimations and guesses on where I think the industry is going in the next 3 to 5 years. You may agree with me, you may not. I've discussed it many times on the Rogue Tech Show and in other videos. But if you're going to buy something for 5+ years, if you want this generation's Sandy Bridge chip that's going to last you a long time, maybe 7 years, the 12 cores, 24 threads of the Ryzen 9 3900X may very well be worth the $170 price jump over the Ryzen 7. It also has double the on-chip cache, 70 megs of cache versus 36. Not quite double, but close. And that's also going to help as textures and games and data and everything else gets larger. If you can afford it, if you are otherwise considering an i9-9900K, I would put the Ryzen 9 3900X on your short list. But there's nothing wrong with a Ryzen 7, and frankly, for most people, it's absolutely fine, and it's $170 less. And that's $170 you can put in your graphics card. That may step you up a whole nother graphics card. So let me know what you think of this benchmark. That's what the comment section is down there for. I'm interested in seeing your thoughts, reading your feedback. I don't respond to everybody because I get too many comments, but I promise you I do read them all. Like this video if you like it, share it with your friends if you love it. Remember to subscribe to my channel with the big huge red button directly below, comment section below. Tech Deals Discord is linked down below. Please consider coming over and joining us, discuss this video, leave your comments there as well if you like. And then you can also follow me on Twitter. I tend to tweet a lot. I'm pretty active over there, and I would love to see you stop by and say hello. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time when we look at the rest of these CPUs. Thanks so much for watching. Bye for now.